we've been talking a lot about those genetic traits, okay, and whether or not we have dominant or recessive traits. We talked about how traits are inherited from parent to offspring. What we haven't talked about is a tool that you can use in order to see what the possible offspring might be from two parents. So Punnett squares are used as a means of displaying the offspring that are possible when two parents reproduce. So we're going to do an example, and we're going to break it down into steps so you can use these steps to solve other problems. So here's the question. So state the possible phenotypes. So remember, phenotypes is our physical appearance. And genotypes. So that's that combination of those two alleles. So, you know, big A, whether they're homozygous dominant, heterozygous, or homozygous recessive. So we're going to state the possible genotypes and phenotypes when a homozygous recessive and a heterozygous parent cross. So they haven't even given us what the genotypes of the parents are. We have to learn that from our terms and from what the question's saying. But they have told us, and they have to tell you, that our dominant trait is brown eyes and the recessive trait is blue eyes. All right, so step one. So the first thing we need to do is we need to write out the symbols and what they stand for. So you don't necessarily have to write this in, but capital B, that capital letter, remember, is for brown eyes. So brown eyes is our dominant trait, and we always use the first letter of that dominant trait, or we often use it to get our symbol. Little b, that's our recessive trait, and again, you don't always have to put that in, but that's blue eyes. So that's our first step. All right, from this question, what do we know? Now, from this question, they told us that the brown trait is, brown eyes is the dominant trait, and the recessive trait is blue eyes. But now, step two, they didn't tell us, or they didn't give us in the question what the parent's genotype was. But they did tell us that one parent was homozygous recessive, and the other parent was heterozygous. So we need to write out those parental genotypes. So homozygous recessive, if we use this, that's going to be little b, little b. Homozygous, homo means the same. Recessive is the lowercase letter. The other one, the other parent was heterozygous. So hetero means different. So they have a capital and a lowercase letter. So they've got one big B and one little b. So far, so good? Perfect. So step three, this is probably the trickiest part. When we have our two parents, they don't give both of their genes or both of their alleles. We only give one, right? In meiosis, we halved the genetic information. So they can only give half. So we have to break down the alleles into the possible gametes. So if this parent that was homozygous recessive, if they give half their genetic information, they can give a big B, or sorry, a little b, or they can give another little b. So these are the possible offspring that they can give, or alleles they could give to their offspring. The other parent, well, they could give a big B, or they could give a little b. Does that make sense? And this, again, when meiosis halves the genetic information, you might get a chromosome with a little b, or you might get a chromosome with a big B. We don't know. However, we can use this Punnett square, kind of looks like a tic-tac-toe board, in order to determine what the possible offspring are. So possible offspring. So again, sometimes you'll see these, sometimes you'll just see it kind of drawn like a tic-tac-toe board. It's like I've got drawn in red. And this one, because I did it in PowerPoint or Word, I just did a chart, like a table, and then I took some of the lines out. So what you're going to do is you're going to place one parent's gametes on one side. So let's say we take these parents' gametes and we're going to put them on one side. So little b, little b. Then the other parent's gametes go on the other side. And I'm just going to use a different color here. So big B, little b. The parental gametes on the outside, it's important to know that you only have one in each of those squares on the outside. So if we say red was the female, those were the eggs, and maybe these were the male gametes, those maybe were the sperm. Okay. So now we need to fill in the chart. So we do that by bringing kind of one down and one across for each of those squares. So I'm going to color code it and kind of write over the boxes. So if this sperm fertilizes the egg, that parent gives the big B. This parent gives the little b, and the offspring is big B, little b. See that possible combination? But this sperm with the little b could fertilize the egg, right? So it would give a little b. The other one still gives a little b, and the offspring would be little b, or that homozygous recessive genotype. Now, it doesn't make much difference with this possible combination, but if this sperm fertilizes a big B, this one can still only give a little b, big B, little b. Or it could be little b and bring it across, little b. So these are the possible offspring that this particular couple could produce. Okay, so now we've created our Punnett square, but now we need to write out these kind of genotypes for our offspring. So step 5 is to write out the possible genotypes. So start by writing out just the combinations and state the amount and the formal name after. You don't always have to do that, but as for practice, when we're starting out, let's do more, and then as you get good at it, you can kind of weed it back. So the offspring could be big B, little b. They could be heterozygous. And if we look back and we count them up, here are our 4 possible offspring, right? 1, 2 out of those 4 were big B, little b. So that's what we see here, 2 out of 4. So that's 50%. That's half. Half of that offspring from that particular parental combination could be heterozygous. The other half, 2 out of 4, were little b, or that homozygous recessive. So far, so good? Now, our question asks us to state the possible genotypes, which we've done. But it also asks us to state the possible phenotypes of those offspring. Okay, so now we have to write out what they might physically look like. If this couple mated, what color eyes would their offspring have? So remember, you will display the dominant trait as long as you have one of the dominant or capital letter alleles. But to show that recessive trait, you need 2 of them, 2 lowercase alleles. So 50%, this is the phenotype. 50% will have brown eyes, right? Big B, little b. Dominant allele is big B. That codes for brown eyes. But these ones with 2 recessive alleles will have blue eyes. 50% will have blue eyes. So now you've solved the possible traits. Okay, so as I suggest, as you go through, you use each of these steps, and you're going to be required to use them later today. So now go ahead and try the practice problem on page 47 using that, those steps.